Thank you very much, Mr. Capuano. I have serious concerns about the potential conflicts of interest with regard to HUD funds that are contributing to the profits of multifamily developments owned in part by the President and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Do you think it's appropriate that the President and his family are profiting from federal government funding intended to support low-income families?
If you can give me a specific example, I can address that question.
Well, I want to know if you think it's appropriate that the President and his family are profiting from any federal government funding intended to support low-income families.
I don't think it's appropriate for public officials in general to do that.
Okay. Do you stand by the President's decision not to divest himself of his interest in properties that receive HUD funding?
I think the best thing to do is tell me specifically what you're talking about, and then I can address it.
What have you done to ensure that HUD is properly handling these unprecedented conflicts of interest?
Again, if you can tell me what the specific thing is, I can address it.
These properties that are owned in part by the President or Mr. Kushner are also reportedly in very bad condition. You know Starrett City, don't you?
Yes, I know of it.
For example, which is part owned by the President. You know that, don't you?
I do know that he has
and you know it has
small
received
part
increasingly declining HUD inspection scores. You know that too, don't you?
Do I know what now?
That it has increasingly declining HUD inspection scores.
I know that there are problems there, yes.
But specifically, do you know that Starrett is a problem, that they have received increasingly declining HUD inspection scores? Do you know that?
I know what is necessary to know as the Secretary of HUD regarding that. Do I know all the numbers about Starrett?
No, I don't want you to know all the numbers. All I want you to know is about Starrett. Starrett, everybody kind of knows a lot about Starrett, and it's partially owned by the President. You are the HUD Secretary, and you're in a conflict of interest situation. And I just want to make sure you understand what you are overseeing. Do you know that they have declining HUD inspection scores?
I know that they've been having difficulty.
Okay, so you know that they have not passed inspection. What are you doing to ensure that these HUD residents are not suffering as a result of poor management and lack of investment by its profit-motivated owners?
Well, of course, we oversee the PHAs that are involved with that and work with them, as we do with the ones all around the country.
We've learned that the owners of Starrett City, the biggest project-based Section 8 contract in the country, of which Tump is part owner, are planning to sell the property. This sale is already rife with controversy as infighting between the ownership is playing out in public. To date, we have no knowledge of how HUD approves the transfer of Section 8 contracts when a property is not FHA insured or HUD held as Starrett City is, because HUD has not published its process. HUD has the ability here to insist upon things like robust tenant protections and longer affordability requirements, but the process is frankly unknown. Have you gotten involved with this? It's a big issue.
We have a very well-formulated group that deals with these kinds of issues. And they will deal with this one in the same way that they deal with all such issues. There won't be anything that's done differently here than has been done. They have not kept
you appraised of what they're doing?
Excuse me?
Are you satisfied with the progress that they're making?
They will handle this as they have handled all things.
So you don't know. They have not kept you appraised. You don't know whether or not the process is working. So I would like a full accounting of the process that your department is planning to employ, including all decision points and who will make them should this process move forward. And so I want you to commit to that because, again, this is a big project that's owned partially by the President of the United States, and I want to know how this sale is going to work, what kind of protection these tenants are going to have, and you should keep yourself appraised of it because I'm going to want to know, as others will want to know, how it is progressing.
We'll be happy to work with you and your staff to disseminate that information.
Time of the gentlelady has expired.
I appreciate having the time. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to how much you care about the most vulnerable in our society and how you want to help people become independent and out of poverty, and yet your budget and what you are advocating for and what you're advocating against does not really define your representation that you care about these vulnerable people. You're cutting public housing by $2 billion, housing choice vouchers by $800 million, project-based rental assistance by $65 million. You have members on the opposite side of the aisle talking about programs that are funded by the Community Development Block Grant. They don't even know that you've completely eliminated that. The Home Investment Partnership Program, we talk about the national housing crisis that we have, and the National Housing Trust Fund is completely eliminated, and the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative eliminated. And, you know, Section 811 housing for persons with disabilities, cut by $121 million. And so there's one thing that stands out in my mind based on the campaign and looking at what happened in the primaries and things that the president said and how he talked to you and others and demeaned you so much. But one of the things that stands out in my mind so vividly is how he mocked and mimicked a disabled journalist. And so you have, let's say, he has openly mocked disabled people, and HUD's most recent budget proposal, which you supported and defended, proposes a steep 18% cut for Section 811 program, which is focused on serving low-income persons with disabilities, as well as harmful rent increases on Section 811 residents. This is very concerning in light of the critical role that HUD plays in providing housing assistance for low-income persons with disabilities, as well as enforcing the Fair Housing Act, which protects persons with disabilities against discrimination in the housing market. Or do you remember seeing that display by the president where he mocked and mimicked disabled journalists? Do you remember seeing the site of that?
I remember seeing the episode that you're referring to.
Do you think it was wrong for the president to send that kind of message about what he cares about disabled people?
Well, you know, I'm not really here to talk about the president. I really want to talk about the people that we're trying to help.
Well, yes, I want to talk about the people, too. Right now, I want to talk about the disabled people. And I want to know if his attitude is such that it is reflected in this budget, and you defend the budget, and are you defending in any shape, form, or fashion the fact that the person who wanted to be the president of the United States of America for all people would treat disabled people that way? What do you think about that?
As a pediatric neurosurgeon, you know, a large portion of my patients were disabled people.
All right, so you do care about disabled people, is that right?
Of course.
When you're in front of disabled people who are advocating for resources to help with their lives, and they ask you about the president and the fact that he mocked and mimicked disabled journalists during the campaign, and they ask you, do you defend the president in doing that? What did you say to them?
I would say that I'm going to use the resources and the talents that we have to look out for the interest of the disabled people. We're going to commit to making sure that they are not displaced.
So do you think the cut of $121 million is a demonstration of your support for the disabled? Section 811 housing for persons who are disabled?
I would say it's not the amount of money, it's the result that you get that's important.
I beg your pardon, I can't hear you.
I would say it's not the amount of money, but rather the result that you achieve that's important.
Well, you keep talking about the amount of money, but you know your real concerns and what you care about is reflected in the budget. And it is difficult for me to believe that you really care about the disabled when you are cutting the resources to them because of the difficulty in their lives and the tremendous needs that they have. It is difficult for me to believe you care about them with these kind of cuts. I yield back.